Hello everyone, we are from Group 1. In this opportunity, we would like to share our analysis based on a journal entitled Sociolinguistics in Language Teaching. Before we start, let me introduce our group members. First, Yudhishthira, NIM 11-2018-062, Brian Anthony, 11-2018-071, Adinda Sundan, 11-2019-007, Putri Indah 11-2019-050, and me, Daniela Devena, 11-2019-018. Now, I want to share what are the contents that are going to be discussed by our group members. First is introduction. Second, what is sociolinguistics? Third, what is language teaching? Fourth, why sociolinguistics is necessary in language teaching? Fifth, the relationship sociolinguistics and language teaching. Next is teaching English as a foreign language associated with sociolinguistics. And the last one is conclusion. Now let's move to the introduction of the journal. The author of the journal is Ahmad Faizin HS from Satu Praya, Lombok Tengah, Nusa Tenggara Barat, Indonesia. The background of the journal is because teachers often disregarded the existence of sociolinguistics in language teaching, and they are more focused on teaching words, grammar, and also pronunciation or speaking. Next is the research method that the author used for doing this journal. So the author used observational method to collect the data. For those who haven't known yet, observational method is a qualitative research method where the target respondent or the subject is observed and analyzed in the natural or real-world setting. And second one, the author used direct observation, the lesson plan, and material. The lesson plan is taken from 4 English teachers. And the author also focused on the speech of the teacher and the suitability of the material or the theme to the student's age, background language, and knowledge level.
So I'm going to present about the sociolinguistics. Sociolinguistics is a study of the relationship between language and social factors, such as class, age, gender, and ethnicity. The subject of sociolinguistics. There are 4 relationships between language and society, according to Grimshaw, 1971. First, language determines society. Second, sociocultural determine language. Third, covariance between social fact and language. And the last, language and society is determined by other factors such as culture, abstract structure, or biological nature. Sociolinguistic approach. There are 3 approaches of sociolinguistics. First, the source approach. Fishman state connotation and a variety of language is associated with a speech and individual, not by language and society. Second, the approach. The approach was pioneered by William Labov that emphasized to language varieties. Third, stylistic variety. This approach used the speaker language varieties in communication adapted to the situation. The major study of the sociolinguistics. The first one is micro-sociolinguistics. Micro-sociolinguistics refers to study of the language phenomenon in social contexts symbolized by micro factors. It scopes of interpersonal communication or person to person. There are 3 main principles of interaction between individuals in a group. First, attainment interaction of communication. Second, acquisition and modification communicative competence. And the last is language attitudes. The second is macro-sociolinguistics. Macro-sociolinguistics tends to study of sociolinguistics phenomenon, including wider variable population, language deployment, or the continuity of language that refers to bilingualism, language attitudes, planning, variety, choice, accent, shift, education, etc. There are three major terms are noteworthy in macro sociolinguistic as follows. First, language contact. Second, language conflict. And the last is language and social change. For the next part will be presented by my friend.
What is language teaching? I believe that all of you have known about language teaching, but I just want to remind you. Language teaching is the process of transferring the language with the phenomenon by the teacher to the learner. It should as a guide to obtain all aspects of language. Language teaching may talk all facets of language such as social, culture, lexicon, syntax, and etc. Language teaching related to society and culture are studied in sociolinguistics. It dissects of the language related to social factors such as class, age, gender, and ethnicity. Therefore, the language user can apply it with appropriate way. The American psychologist Steven Pinker describes language as being so tightly woven in the human experience that it's scarcely possible to imagine human life without it. In present, the teacher in teaching language in primary, junior high school, senior high school often neglect to the social linguistic field, especially in foreign language teaching. Related to the language teaching, the teacher should consider the individual factors of learners. Three of them are age, social context, and educational context. The first one is age. Language will be very good if learned from an early age. Lemberg in 1967 argued that languages are best learned before puberty, after which everyone faces constraints in language development. While Stephen Press in 1981 in favor of younger is better argued that second language development by child and adult might actually involve differences process. But there are others who suggest that older is better, because older learners have cognitive and literacy skills that tend to enhance their second language development. McLaughlin 1987 and Snow 1983. It seems reasonable to deduce that pH does have an influence on second language development. The second one is social context. Social context refers to a range of language learning environments such as the home, the neighbor, the classroom, and the society at large. The movement of first language to second language involves more than psycholinguistic abilities. It depends on the historical, political, and social forces as well. Hoflinkel 2002, Hall 2002, and Siegel 2003. Additionally, social context is critical because it shapes various learning and teaching issues, such as the motivation for second or foreign learning, the goal of second or foreign learning, the function a second or foreign language is expected to perform in the community, the availability of input to the learner, the variation in the input, and the norms of proficiency acceptable to that particular speech community. Studies conducted by Wang Fillmore 1989 reveal that social settings create and shape opportunities for both learners and competent speakers of the second or foreign language to communicate with each other, thereby maximizing learning potential. The third one is educational context. Studies on the educational context grounded in educational psychology emphasizes in the inseparability and reciprocal influence of educational institutions and settings in which learning and teaching operations are embedded. From Bloom and Green, 1992. The individual factors play an important role in triggering and maximizing the learner's master the language. Therefore, they may not be neglected in language teaching. According to Kamara Fadifel 2001, it is impossible to insult classroom life for the dynamics of political, educational, and societal institutions because if the experience participants bring to the classroom are shaped not only by the learning and teaching episodes they have encountered in the classroom, but also by a broader social, economic, educational, and political environment in which they grow up. The educational context will condition the relationship between the home language and the school language, between standard language and its non-standard varieties.
Why sociolinguistics is necessary in language teaching. So from the journal, I have found 4 important points about the reasons why sociolinguistics is important in language teaching. First, sociolinguistics is the branch of linguistics of dealing with the influence of society on language and vice versa, or language in society. This is to deal with how language is acquired and modified according to different circumstances. Sociolinguistics as an integral part of study language in common as of impact of society over language. So it is very important to spare of the study of language. And then, as I said before in the introduction, teachers are more focused on teaching words, grammar, pronunciation, and text content, and they forget how to teach the student to use appropriate language in appropriate places and cultures. And we should know that language is used by different contexts, people, and reason why language is learned. And then the second reason why sociolinguistics is necessary in language teaching. Sociolinguistics is study of language between culture and society. So I think we all know about this, right? So as a language learners, we should have the awareness of sociolinguistics because the very act of using language is in fact social. So language developed out of the need to communicate and interact. Therefore, language is social by nature, and understand about language is allow us to more effectively use the language. And social phases of language were first studied under the guise of linguistic anthropology, pioneered by William Labov in the US and Basil Bernstein in the UK. Historically, the more exotic cultures in language were primary interest to sociolinguistics, while Western languages remained unexplored and ignored. And the third reason, sociolinguistics take up the social space in the study of language on topics that linguistics usually keep in the background. In other words, this is the effort to understand the way that social dynamics are affected by individual and or language use, variation in language, and varying attitudes towards language. So the example of this point is when men and women speak, it will be different, and also how children and teens speak, and And then the different social stages communication. The last point why sociolinguistics is important in language teaching is that being unaware of social characteristics or aspects of sociolinguistics can lead to embarrassing situations as a language learner. So, as an example, in Italy, pointing person, even pointing on object, is considered extremely rude, while in the US, pointing considered acceptable except pointing to other people. So when American learn Italian where to point during communication, it will consider rude and aggressive and not a very good way to make a friend. According to David Blusma, when we make mistakes like this, it will lead people to think that we are ignorant and also ill-mannered, dishonest, insincere, rude, pushy, and etc. And the most intimidating part is that when the better you are at speaking, the more severely you are judged in total communication. So that's why we have to improve and develop our social linguistic skills as an important facet of our language learning experience.
So the next one is the relationship sociolinguistic and language teaching. Language is the communication of thoughts and feelings through voice, sounds, gesture, or written symbol that used by people who live in some area. Society is a group of people related to each other or large social grouping sharing in the same territory. So, sociolinguistic is the field of study having to do with the interaction of language and the society. According to Rachel Howleder, 2010, there are several factors that correlate to language teaching in sociolinguistic perspective. The first one is ethnicity. Ethnicity results in significant linguistic variation, the adaptation of second language phrases and grammatical construct into first language typify the language of many ethnic minorities. And then the second one is gender. There are recorded differences in the ways men and women use language. These differences are observable across a whole range of linguistic variables. According to of 1975, observation were checked as demonstrating that women were linguistically less powerful than men. Issues in the society has different linguistic expectation of the sexes. These differences are not confined to lexical and grammatical differences, but are also clearly evident in prosodic features. And then the third one is geography. All language demonstrate geographic variation. Regional differences can be strong or subtle. Some languages experience such strong regional variation as to make comprehension a real issue. For example, Northern and Bavarian German. It is important to distinguish between regional variation, dialect, and accent. Dialects mean lexical and grammatical variation, and accent means pronunciation pattern. In practice, these two factors often combine to form what most people consider a recognizable regional variation. And then the next one is social class. There are observable differences in language across class boundaries in a society. The language used by professional classes is labeled as correct and promoted by government, education, and the media as the standard of language. In contrast, other forms of the language are labeled as incorrect and considered to substandard of a language. And then the last one is occupation and role. People shape their language to the role they are. It has been found that there are obvious variation in the use of language used by people belonging to varieties of occupation. This is also an experience that language teaching are significantly affected owing to practical variation. People of various occupation need diverse language knowledge and linguistic training and orientation. And then the next one will be presented by Dinda.
Teaching English as a foreign language associated with sociolinguistics. As we know, foreign language education has become a significant phenomenon in this era. People learn a foreign language for personal or professional needs, to qualify for education abroad or becoming a student exchange, to communicate with colleges in international corporations, to prepare for travel or job. In order to understand this phenomenon, it has become important to have broad knowledge of the process of language acquisitions, second or foreign language education, sociolinguistic, linguistic, psycholinguistic, and specific knowledge of foreign language teaching techniques and methods of measurement and evaluations. Teaching English as a foreign language, which is also known as teaching English to speakers of other language, involve teaching English to students whose first or second language is not English. For example, in Indonesia, where the first language is vernacular and the second one is Indonesian. The learners may be children or adults with varying level of ability. According to Yasemin Bayut, 2013, the significance of sociolinguistics in foreign language education is examined along three dimensions. Attitudes towards learning a foreign language, inclusions of culture in foreign language lessons, and the contribution of language planning to foreign language education. Curriculum and instruction can be arranged to promote positive attitudes towards the foreign language to be learned and nationalities associated with the language. Inclusion of cultural elements in the foreign language curriculums helps learners to understand new language concept and provides a context for their use. The basic theoretical features of sociolinguistics and the context of its practice lend foreign language education its rich social content. To illustrate, when one considers language education in a school context, noting student-teacher interactions alongside educational component of teaching and learning, the significance of social interaction is readily perceived. Regarding communications functions, the application of sociolinguistics in a classroom context can contribute enormously to the development of foreign language teaching techniques. In teaching English as a foreign language, also the learners should be introducing the use of English in social context appropriately. They are not only be able to express it, but also they have the capability to determine the correct expression for appropriate situation, class, age, gender, time, or other social contexts.
The next one is conclusion. Sociolinguistics has an important role in the language teaching because this consists of study of the link between language and society. Sociolinguistics lead the learners to speak in appropriate social contexts. Therefore, it is very important to the teachers to introduce sociolinguistics through language teaching. The teacher cannot hope to transform the students' sociolinguistic competence overnight, but by contextualize the presentation of language, regularly reviewing the impact of social and cultural factors on language and lessons with a functional approach. Sociolinguistics do not need to be introduced as isolated exercise, but as a context and social aspect could be incorporated into tools, exercise, and examples. So that's the end of our presentation today. If you have any question or suggestion, you can unmute your microphone or you can put your question or suggestion into the chat.